Mino Line Media presents the Business First Podcast.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonia Alleyne. I am your host, and today I am excited to introduce you to Byron McGowan, who is a cattle farmer and an arborist. He's going to explain what that is in a minute. But because we have, this is the first time we've ever had someone in agriculture on the podcast. And so I want to give you all just a little background. I'm going to read off just a couple of bullets that I have, several bullets that I have, so that you have an idea of some context. And honestly, each one of these bullets could probably be a podcast all on its own. And so I would, even urge you to do some research on your own based on some of the things that I'm going to read off. I look forward to discussing some of these things with Byron and for you all to actually hear his dynamic story. And so I want to start with, when you think about agriculture, our roots date back to before slavery. And as many of you know, after slavery, many became sharecroppers under really bad conditions. By 1919, though, Black farmland ownership peaked at around 18 million acres, representing roughly 14% of total agricultural land. Today, however, Black farmers make up 1% of all U.S. farmers. Of course, there are several reasons for this decline. After World War II, there was the Great Migration north, where people were escaping Southern racism, but they were also looking for jobs in manufacturing and in industrial fields. Black farmers also were grossly denied governmental and banking support. In 1997, Black farmers, led by the National Black Farmers Association, filed a discrimination lawsuit against the USDA, which settled at $1.06 billion. That included cash relief, tax payments, and debt relief. It was one of the largest civil rights class action settlements in U.S. history. In 2010, President Barack Obama signed a law to add $1.15 billion in compensation. And then in 2021, I should say, in 2020, we were all dealing with the pandemic. In 2021, the American Rescue Plan Act allocated $4 billion in debt relief, and that was for farmers of color to address the impact of COVID. Roughly 16,000 minority farmers benefited from that relief. And it becomes an ongoing plight for some, ongoing, hopefully, opportunities. I mean, that's the struggle in entrepreneurship, always searching for where the opportunities are. And with that, I would like to bring in Byron McGowan, who is the owner of McGowan Farms. He, like I said earlier, he is a cattle farmer and arborist, and he is also the owner of Easton Hauling and Trees. Welcome, Byron.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Good. Thank you for being here. As you hear, and as an entrepreneur, the focus is just to get your work done, to build your farm, to build your business, to create a legacy for your family. But when you hear about the history of Black farmers and farming in this country in general, what does that bring up for you? What does that make you feel like?
Well, it kind of hits a sore spot for me a little. I grew up in a household to where we weren't a farming household. I had a blue collar father that worked, typical hours. Mother that was a nurse that worked at a hospital with standard hours. But my father and uncles and everyone the generation before them, they actually did come from farming. They grew up on someone else's land, being able to harvest cotton with them and corn and dairy cattle and several other agricultural aspects that were handled on that property. Well, fast forward 2 generations, and none of that land that they grew up on is accessible by any of our family, and pretty much none of it's owned by any of the family anymore. So, as I began the journey myself to trying to become a farmer and looking at acquiring land and equipment and all these things that, of course, aren't easy to get because they're expensive. Your story and the numbers that you read off became a real stark reality to me, because I started the process of doing the USDA and attempting to get grants and loans and going to local farm banks and things of that nature. And just kind of firsthand got to see um, what I was hearing about around the nation. But also, unfortunately, a lot of my counterparts of other races and different ethnicities weren't having this same battle, because the generations before them, their land, they didn't have to give it up, or they were knowledgeable enough and they were informed enough to where they knew about different tax loopholes to where they didn't lose their land. Whereas, my grandfather and some of his counterparts during those times, they just weren't, they didn't have access to a lot of that info. So a lot of times their land was just, taken. I hate to say it, it was taken illegally and in a very illegal manner, it seems like, but something that would be what I would consider to be morally wrong. To answer your question, yeah, it definitely hits home because I got to see it firsthand. My dad's told me stories for 30, 40 plus years. He told me stories about all this cool farm stuff he got to do. And it's like, man, that's what I want to do, but I can't walk outside of my parents' house and start doing it. I've got a lot of hurdles to get over to get to where we are today. So I think my biggest message to not just the African American community, but just anyone that comes from a place to where they weren't born with this stuff, they didn't inherit it. It's not impossible. It's very possible. But is it hard? Yes, I'll never sugarcoat it. Are there a lot more doors that get closed than open? Yes, unfortunately. And even with the settlement that happened through the National Black Farmers Association, even with that going on and how awesome that was, it's still a struggle. It's still not over. And now with everything going on with the current administration, there's a whole new bucket of obstacles that are being thrown out there right now. So is it getting better? Yes, but is it where we want it to be and more of a leveled out playing field? No, we've still got a long journey to go on.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that I did read off all of these data points was because as much as we rely on farmers, it's one of the industries, agriculture is one of the industries that we pay probably the least amount of attention to. And so we don't really think about, like, we're very fortunate to go into our neighborhood stores or some of the bigger box stores and pick up exactly what we need whenever we need it, the amount that we need, but we don't really think about where it comes from and the sources of that. And to your point, we didn't talk about the tariffs, which is a new hurdle and challenge to deal with. We haven't talked about weather, which is when you came on, that's what you were dealing with. Like, there's a storm
Mhm.
brewing in Alabama where you are, which can adversely affect what's going on. And then we also, one of the things I'd like to talk about is the stigma, where it's not even an industry that people, if you tell someone I'm interested in going into farming, it's not an occupation that people would be excited for you about, or maybe even interested in to know more. And so your efforts to be in this space, as an educated man, right, to be in this space is I hope will do a lot for what we need to understand about this industry. Tell us a little bit about your, because I kind of want to deal with the stigma as well.
Mhm.
You are a military vet.
Correct.
You've worked in corporate America, and so you've had an interesting journey to decide and choose that agriculture is a place that you are going to build your legacy.
hmm Yeah, and kind of where that passion came from and the idea of even going this direction was kind of back to my previous topic of watching local families have their second, third, and fourth generation of farms take over, and my counterparts and peers graduate high school and college and be able to go back and start working at the family farm if that's what they wanted to do. Or if they didn't, they could at least use parts of the farm to put up for collateral for college or for, master's degrees or whatever it is they may want to do. Whereas I was watching more black and brown people that were my peers and cousins and friends and family have to go to these banks for loans and loans and loans, and then you find yourself kind of becoming at their mercy, and you're more concerned about working to pay off the loan as opposed to working to fulfill your dream or build a legacy for your family. So as I kind of watched that, I said, okay, whoever's coming after me, and at the time I didn't have any children or anything, and I said, okay, whoever is coming after me, when they turn 18, I want them to have some options. I want them to be able to look multiple different directions and do what makes their heart happy. Not saying it's going to be easy what they choose, and I'm not going to attempt to make it easy, but I want them to be able to come back home to home base and start here on their journey wherever they want to go. So, if my son Easton decides he wants to be an electrician, a plumber, a doctor, or astronaut, whatever. I'd like for him to be able to come here and use a work ethic that he was able to build here at home at the farm, but also be able to use some of that business credit that we've been able to build with the farm, and be able to use different resources that running a business like this allows your children to have that I don't think gets talked about. These other families who have these things or have it generationally, they're not necessarily what I would consider or call wealthy or rich or words of that nature. I think they're just more resource filled. And they've learned the process of how to use those resources to help their kids make that next jump a little easier. So that was initially what started my thought process behind it. And like you said, the stigma behind it, it is not a glamorous way of life. It's not. When it's raining, you're in it. When it's hot, you're in it. A lot of Saturdays and Sundays when my fraternity brothers are having cookouts and doing fun stuff that I would love to be at. I've got I've got hay to move and cattle to move and things of that nature. Or even, later on when we talk about the tree business, same thing with it. There's a lot of times that it's just that's what calls and that's what I have to do. But the stigma behind it, I always tell people the way you get over that stigma is figure out what your why is in wanting to even attempt or think about agriculture. And same thing with tree work as well. Tree work is not a easy avenue at all to go down. It is hard, dangerous work. But it's something you have to have a passion for and a why for as well. So for me with the farm and with the tree service, my why is my son, his peers, his cousins. I have teenagers that come by once or twice a week that work and help out. A lot of them don't even want money. They don't want payment. They just want to be over there. They want to drive a tractor. They want to be around cows. They want to do and be and just absorb it. And in the meantime, they don't realize they're actually building a work ethic. It's fun to them, but they're learning how to be in the elements and working when it's not comfortable, because it's not always going to be comfortable when you go to work. So if you can figure out what your why is behind wanting to get into this space, there is a lot of fun in it. There's a lot of aspects of it that I just wouldn't trade for the world. You just have to find your aspect that's your love for it.
And in the other podcast where you were interviewed on the Mino Lion Network, you talked about your travels as a military person taught you a lot and exposed you to a lot that have benefited you in this new work. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned in your travels in the military?
Sure. So a lot of my travels, or I'll just start with my very first large span of travel, was in parts of Africa. which is now, I think the U.S. has deemed it as Camp Lemonnier. So it's a camp that they have there, a permanent duty station that they have for some. When the Marine Corps, when we first went, it was not a permanent duty station. We were there for a few different missions that were going on in that theater. But during my time there, we did have time to meet locals and go out and see local children. And most of the people that worked inside of our camp were local people from the area. So we got to see them, how they were physically built and made up. And you can kind of look at someone and tell whether or not they're meeting all their nutritional needs every day or not. And through our travels through town and patrolling and meeting people and going out and about, you got to realize that most of these people were simply utilizing whatever was there closest to them and whatever they had the easiest access to for their nutrition, which a lot of times for their children meant it was very, very meek nutrition at times, or sometimes none whatsoever, which directly correlates, and the U.S. Department of Education has shown it as well. It directly correlates to a child's ability to learn and absorb, to be able to stay awake and focus and things of that nature. You know, there's certain foods out there that are so uh, GMO filled and just so filled with things that are coming from some of these plants and factories, to where when you put it in your body's working overtime to process it. And that's why you end up tired and things of that nature. So through seeing that, through a lot of my travels overseas, and just seeing something like you said earlier, as simple as we can run down the street to our local grocery store and we've got 8 different choices of what type of beef we want, what type of pork we want. Well, in a lot of those spaces over there, that just wasn't the case. They were eating the same thing repetitively, and it was just wherever it came from, it came from. However, it was processed, it was processed. Unfortunately, it also directly relates to a lot of the health issues that were coming along with it as well. So when I got back, kind of fast forward into my next career, when I got into hazardous tree removal and tree work, a lot of the space that I do removals in are sometimes in lower income parts of town. And I started to notice when we would take lunch that there was never a really nice grocery store to go and grab our lunch at. There wasn't like a place where we could get a good salad for lunch, or get a handmade burrito that was going to have healthy, clean chicken in it, or anything of that nature. We started to realize, and my guys are actually the ones that brought it up, but we began to realize during these lunch hours and these lunch breaks in these parts of town, we basically got to eat something that's super processed, super greasy, or both. It's probably frozen. It's probably been fried in today's and yesterday's grease. And we realized that after we would eat it, none of us felt good. When it came time to get back in the heat after that lunch and it's 95 degrees and we've still got a job to do, we just didn't have the energy. On the flip side of the coin, we go to a different part of town where we're doing a removal. It's lunchtime. We go to our favorite burrito place or whatnot. We come out and we literally feel almost rejuvenated for the next 3, 4 hours of the day with that protein and good nutrition inside of us. So that got me to scratching my head as well, and realizing that a lot of the socioeconomic areas that you typically see black and brown people, there just isn't a lot of access to that cleaner food that can rejuvenate you and get you to feeling good for the second half of your day or any part of your day. So that's kind of where my vision started to say, I think I want to learn how to affect this, whether it be on a small scale or large scale. I think I can help somebody with it.
And it sounds like you do a very good job. I was happy to learn that your cattle is grass fed, and that for customers who are interested in supporting you, you're interested in giving them information. You're very accommodating, because what you're also saying is, as much as this was an enlightening moment for you, so many other people don't understand what this process is to shop directly from a farm. And so, can you talk about some of the education that you have to do and what you actually help people with in terms of, deciding to support a farm to get their food, and particularly like their beef and their steaks and that type of thing?
Yeah, well, typically the first question I get is, so other than supporting local, which thankfully a lot of people are trying to do right now, one of the first questions I get is, what's the difference in your beef and a piece of beef that I buy out of a grocery store that comes out of a box that I order online somewhere? And I typically respond with, hey, let me give you my address, stop by. I want you to see, because the transparency of it is a lot of what goes into a lot of the larger packagers and a larger beef providers is simply a very bulk microwavable process to get the animal big fast. In the cattle industry, pounds pays. The bigger they are, the faster you can get them big, the less you put in, the more you can get out. So your goal is for every 3 pounds of grain or feed that you put in that cow, you're hoping to put 3 pounds in and hope to get 5 pounds out on a good day. Well, that's just not genetically possible, and honestly, in the real world. So if you're making it happen, then that means you got some other stuff going on that's kind of pushing it forward and kind of speeding up that process that nature doesn't intend to happen that quickly. So typically, I'll have that discussion with someone and bring them in and simply show them our feeding process. Let them come out and walk in the grass. I'll tell them, bring your kids, uh, bring your kites, fishing rods, whatever it is you want to bring down. Walk in the grass, see the place. Watch the cows eat, see what they do nutritionally, if they do need any extra nutrition. If an animal is injured or sick or anything like that, because they do get injured. If an animal is injured or sick or anything of that nature, you get to see the process of how they actually are never used for beef. If an animal, I'll just use for instance, if an animal gets what's called blackleg, which is a virus at times that some cattle or bovine animals will get. Well, if they get it, they're going to have a vaccine and they're going to have an antibiotic in order to keep them alive. So if that ever happens to an animal, and thank the Lord it's never happened with one of ours, but we have had neighbors that have battled it. And if that does happen, the animal gets antibiotic. If it were to happen here at our place, the animal immediately comes out, it'll be taken off and it'll actually be sold as just a piece of livestock animal to another farm, because there may be another farm that just needs a new set of heifers for his new and upcoming bull. He may want new calves. He may not care about any of that, but as far as us, we want to make sure that antibiotic filled animal never makes it into anyone's plate or anyone's grill. um, so after bringing you through, kind of showing you that, if you do stop by, then we go through the process of what size family do you have? Do you have 6 people, eight, 10? Do you cook beef once a week, every other day, and kind of get a feel for how often you consume beef. And from there, we'll figure out what poundage works. I have a lot of people that call, especially larger families, and they go, hey, we want to buy a whole cow. We want the entire cow. So reserve us one, grow it, let us know when it's ready. And I'll tell them typically, hey, are you sure you want a whole cow? Because a 1,200 pound living standing cow, by the time you do the whole processing and deboning and all that, and it goes through the USDA inspection, you're going to be left with about 475 to 450 to 475 pounds of beef. And that is a lot of beef. It's a whole lot of beef. So that's probably the thing that I spend the most time discussing with someone is, how often are you eating beef? And if you say, well, Byron, I'm not sure how often we eat it. All I know, I got $200 to spend. I got $100 to spend. Well, in that case, I'll sit down and go, okay, let's get you most bang for your buck. Let's figure out what do you have coming up next. Do you and the wife want to have steaks for the next 2 Fridays? Do you have a kid's birthday party coming up that you're barbecuing, and kind of get a feel for what you've got going on and coming up? And we'll put you together a package based off of what you've got coming up. And thankfully, with the size we are now, I can still be super hands on with all of our customers. I can take the time to have those conversations and just try to do my very, very best to make sure when you spend your money, you're getting what you ask for, and you don't end up with $300 worth of ground beef and $30 worth of steaks.
You're offering a concierge service. Like that's
Yes, in a
pretty
sense.
pretty extensive
Hmm.
to walk people through the level of not only what you can manage, but how you think you want to eat over the next month or however long, I'm prepared to spend for. What what inspired you to do that level of customer service, particularly in a time? I mean, I've done other shows where I've talked about how customer service is really at an all-time low. And so when you think about farming services, or if you think about a cattle farm, I would never expect that level of customer service, but you offer it.
Well, at first, when I purchased my own cow for to eat for me and my family at the time, and this was years and years ago, and I purchased it was a half a cow. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, I grill out a lot for football games and basketball games. I have friends and fraternity brothers that stop by. So I'm sitting there thinking a half a cow isn't going to last us any time. And then I look up almost a year later and I've still got steaks and roast, and I still got a lot of meat left. I actually had to go and buy a completely separate deep freezer for that very first half a cow, and it still filled up that deep freezer and an additional
And that
one
was a
part of
half
it.
a cow.
That was half a
That
cow.
was a half. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So after that, I knew the gentleman personally who had sold it to me, and I realized, I said, okay, I wish he had a kind of filled me in on this a little bit more when I came and asked him, when I told him, hey man, I'm about to give you, at the time, I think I gave him about $1,400. I said, I'm about to give you $1,400. Can
Yeah.
you kind of walk me through what all I'm getting here to make sure I'm not throwing my money away? The beef was awesome. I enjoyed all of it over time, but just being transparent, I probably would have spent about 700 instead of 1,400 and cut that amount, that volume in half, and probably been able to enjoy it a lot more efficiently than I did. So once I saw that, and then through a little trial and error through a couple of my first larger sales, a similar scenario with my customers, and they're just like, wow, Byron, I bought a whole cow and I've given part to my brother and my sister and my dad and me, and we still don't know what we're going to do with all this beef. I actually had one gentleman, he asked me, he says, is there any way I can store part of the beef at your place, or do you want to maybe buy $400 of it back? Because we can't eat this
Wow.
much. So I said, okay, I'd rather do it right the first time than to have someone that has to go home and figure this out on their own. So let me hold your hand. Let me what this is what I do every day. So let me walk you through it. The extra 5 minutes we spend on the front end could save us hours on the back end, and just make it where you and your family get to actually enjoy every time you go over there to the freezer, as opposed to my buddy's wife that was just like, man, more beef, great, hamburgers again. She just kind of, she was kind of hamburgered out, and she's like, why did we buy this much? So I said, we won't have that happen again.
Right. Can you walk us through some of the I don't know if they're terms, but
Mhm.
they're the labels that are put on some of these packages, like grass fed versus grain fed
Mhm.
versus and that's usually what you'd get at a farm, if I'm assuming correctly. Like you
Mhm.
get grass fed or grain fed, and
Mhm.
then what you should be looking on in terms of packaging. What I've noticed is, because in the last 5 years I've been a lot more diligent about how I buy my food, where it comes from, the sourcing, things I didn't do maybe 10 years ago that I'm and what I also notice is packaging in the supermarket can be tricky to make you think that, oh yeah, this must be farm sourced, or oh, this sounds like it's organic, or so there's all of these different terms that people are using to make you think you're buying something that's really good, but it's nothing in terms of what you're actually getting.
Correct. So, and like you said, the two most noticeable labels you'll see out there are grass fed and then you'll see grain finished. And what that means is if you're going to be and say it's 100% grass fed, that means that cow from the time that he was born until the time that he made it to wherever the butcher was, the only thing he ate was grass, hay, um, silage, which silage comes from grass and hay when it's been ground up for an animal to eat. Sometimes you'll do that in the wintertime to up their calorie intake in order to help them keep warm. Because that's how a cow stays warm. They stay warm by intaking food in the daytime. Their stomachs process it at night and it generates heat internally. So grass fed, that's what grass fed is. Grass fed grain finished means that cow, he's still eating grass every day. He's still eating hay every day, but he's also getting a certain percentage of his nutrients and his daily needs from grain. Now, if you're in the space like myself and like a couple of my neighbors, the grain that we use, if someone does request grain finished, we always make sure that we source our grain from other farmers that are using actual clean grain that has come out of the ground, that is coming from an actual piece of wheat, that's coming from an actual hay bale, an actual piece of corn, and not something that is coming from a processed compressed pellet or something. And there's two different aspects of flavor content and flavor profile between a 100% grass fed and a grass fed grain finished. And I always tell my customers that if you want a really super lean piece of beef that isn't going to have a lot of fat content, it's not going to have a lot of water and moisture to it, it may even be a little bit tougher potentially, then that's going to be your 100% grass fed. The grass fed grain finished 90% of the time is what people end up wanting to go with because everyone wants that same taste that they get when they go to Ruth Chris and Perry's and the other places that you go out for date night and out for a good meal. Well, those pieces of beef have had grain in them. That's where that marbling content comes from, which is the different fats that are in it. Those fats that are in there is actually what is breaking down in your mouth that's giving you all that flavor and all those good feelings that you get when you eat a good piece of beef. Well, that's what it's coming from. It's coming from that marbling that's in there. So those are your two primary labels. And then the other that you spoke about is kind of your country of origin is the biggest label that I typically preach to people about. USA beef, American grown beef. I've seen it worded a few different ways. USA grown beef or USA beef simply means that the animal was butchered here in the United States. It does not mean that animal was grown in the United States. It does not mean that that's where he was eating at or any of that. And that's where the smoke and mirrors kind of start to come in at. One of North America's largest beef packagers, JBS, they're a Brazilian company. A lot of their cattle are housed and fed south of the border. A lot of them are in Brazil and other places where they don't have as many parameters around them to make sure that those animals are intaking clean content and that they're being grown a certain way. So you can take a cow that spent his 48 months there getting to weight, or 24 months. They'll take him, bring him across the border, get him over here across the border, and then butcher him here. Or they'll actually go ahead and expire him there, take his life there, and they will move the carcass across the border in a truck, of course. But as long as it's not butchered or broken down until it gets here, that stamp and that label is going to say USA beef. And that's when you start to get into kind of some funny business there a little bit at times. And that's where it kind of pays to find someone local. Even if you're in an area where you can't necessarily find a farm like mine to drive directly up to, if you can find a grocery store that tries to purchase locally. And typically you can ask, I know at a lot of our smaller grocery stores, you can go in and ask the butcher guy in the back, hey man, where's most of your beef coming from? And he'll tell you if it's one of the big providers, he'll throw the name out there, or he'll say, hey, we get some specialty cuts in on Friday from Johnny's local farm down the road. Come by on Friday, get some of Johnny's cuts. So those are the labels to keep an eye out for, and also just kind of know what you're getting. That country of origin is the biggest one that the USDA, I guess, like I said, it's the one that they kind of use for the smoke and mirrors to kind of make sure that they're getting their big packagers product in front of you every week.
Wow. So for consumers, they have to not only read the labels, but do their research on what the labeling actually means, so they're getting exactly
Correct.
what they think they're paying for. You are also, Byron, an arborist,
Mhm.
and so you've always had a fascination with the outdoors. You like being outside. So you are in, and I want you to talk about this business, but you are essentially where you were destined to be. Like, this is, you feel at home in these businesses, don't you? As tough as they are, as grueling as they are, because you said that being an arborist is not an easy job either, but you seem happy. And I mean, the viewers can't see you, but you don't look stressed. You look very healthy. You look like a happy guy. So you are really where you are supposed to be, huh?
Yes, yeah, I feel so. I definitely feel so. And, it's funny. I never was blessed to meet my grandfather. He passed before I was born, but he actually, along with farming, and this is crazy, along with farming, he did what we call here in the South pulpwooding. He cut timber. So I came
And what was
along
that term
and
again?
pulpwooding. Yeah.
Pulpwooding. Okay.
So that's what he did. So he was a timber guy. He cut trees every day and handled dairy cows and all that. And growing up, I'd heard about it. I never got to see any of it. I just heard all the stories from my dad and uncles and neighbors and other people that grew up with my dad. Because there are several black families in town that cut trees for a living. So as I grew up, never in a million years that I think I would actually be cutting trees. But I did always know, I was like, man, I just want to be outside. I want to be doing, I don't know if I want to fish for a living, which I would probably be very skinny and very hungry if I was a fisherman for a living. But I just didn't know, but I knew I wanted to be outdoors. So yes, arborist work or tree work, logging, it's the number one most dangerous profession in North America by OSHA. And I think this is like the fifth year in a row it's been number one. So it is dangerous. It's a lot of moving parts. It takes a high level of skill to deal with a 60, 70,000 pound tree that's sometimes hanging over the roof of people's houses with power lines growing in them and things of that nature. But like you said, it's fun. It seems like each day is a new field trip for me. Like I feel like a little school bus should be picking me up with my lunchbox to go see what's new on the menu today in the tree world. So yeah, I've been blessed to find what I think the Lord gifted me with, and it's just funny. It came full circle back to something that my granddad did as well. Mama wasn't the most excited about it when I told her I was doing it. Because when I came out the Marine Corps, she was kind of thinking, okay, great, he's getting ready to do something safe. And she even said, she said, baby, use your brain, not your back. Let's go do something else. And I'm
Wow.
like, okay, here we go. I'm gonna go do the office thing or this or that. And I said, "No, Mom, we're starting a business, and it's gonna be hard. It's not gonna be pretty. It's gonna have some struggles." And she goes, "Okay, just don't you buy no chainsaws." She says, "As long as you ain't fooling with no chainsaws, we're okay." Well, you you
I
come
was about
here
to say you
now.
kind of need a chainsaw, don't you?
There's, oh, there's more than I know what to do with now, and it's funny because a very brief story. My mother, years and years ago, we were eating Sunday dinner. I went down to visit, and she said, Byron, my friend called me wanting a tree cut. And I told her that, darling, you need to call the professionals. I'm not going to tell Byron about this. You need to call the professionals. And I remember being a little bit offended. Now, at the time, I was definitely still in my maturation and growth portion of learning how to safely do this job. And it's funny because now, Mom, if you run into her in town or at church or wherever you see my mother at, she will quickly tell you, if you need a tree cut, you call my baby. Let me hunt. Here's one of his cards. Let me. So um, I'm thankful I stuck with it. But so mamas out there, if your son tells you something crazy he's about to go and try and do, just pray for him. Just pray for him. It might work out. So,
Well, what I didn't know is that it is one of the most dangerous, like listed number one by
yes.
OSHA. And is that because of is it everything? Is it the tools? It's the how a tree might fall. You mentioned the power lines. Is it all of those things that are?
Yeah, it's all of those things. You think about the fact of, if you just put yourself in our shoes and you take the human body that's made out of flesh and you're about to get ready to disassemble this
Right.
large inanimate object. And in a lot of cases, like the project that we were on today, we're 120 feet in the air. You have a chainsaw strapped to you. A lot of the cuts that you're making, the saw is within a foot of your face and within a few inches of your hands and arms as you're making these cuts. Your ropes and different knots that you're using to safely rig these pieces of tree away from people's homes, those knots, they have to be right every single time. If they're not right, someone's life could be at stake. A lot of those factors is what plays in when it comes to making it number one. And also just the fact that, a lot of times, a lot of people don't call someone about a tree until it's already dead and it's decayed and it's breaking down. And now it's not healthy when I get there. And I've still got to somehow safely get it to the ground without harming your home or myself. And at times, unfortunately, at times, these dead trees, they will do what they want to do at times. So you add all of that in, like you said, the tools, the elements. When a lot of these storms come through, like our tornado season here in Alabama, sometimes you're talking 100% humidity, and your local neighborhood, the people want the trees off their houses when the tornado leaves. So you're talking 16 and 18-hour days, 100% humidity, and fatigue with a chainsaw that could easily harm human flesh if it accidentally touches it. So when you just bundle all of that stuff together, it's kind of a bad recipe for disaster if you don't have level-headed people in place that know how to look out for one another, that know how to kind of hold each other up. And that's, I think that really is kind of part of what drove me into tree work. Was I wanted the same camaraderie that I felt as a Marine and that brotherhood that we had there. I wanted to have, and unfortunately I picked something dangerous again, but
Well, I
I
was going to
wanted.
say you like a challenge. That was going to be my next question. I
Yeah.
was just like, you obviously like a challenge because of all of the military areas that you could have gone into. you chose the Marines. So, and you were warned before you went in. So, but you were just like, you know what, I'm gonna do this anyway. I'm gonna do this.
Yep,
We might go to war,
yep,
but you're like,
yep.
let me just go ahead and sign up.
Yeah, hats off to my recruiter from years ago, wherever he is at on earth, because he didn't sugarcoat it. And he just simply told me, he said, Byron, it's not going to be fun. It's nothing exciting about it. You're going to Paris Island. There's no Facebook. There's no college parties. It sucks. So if this is what you want, and then when you get out, you're going to get sent to be with a group of guys, and you're probably going somewhere where it's going to suck again. But you're going to get some really cool equipment. You're going to get some big weapons, and you're going to get this set of dress blues, and you're going to be called a Marine for the rest of your life. And I said, sign me up. I said, that sounds like a great time to me. So, and that's how we ended up here. So,
But you have survived it all, so you have done well. What do you think is next for the farms? What would you like people? What type of support? And like you said, there are more and more people who do want to shop locally, which is great. You offer a fantastic service, amazing product. Do you also have a mail order part of the business as well? For people who aren't in the Alabama area? And what part of Alabama are you?
we're in Pell City, Alabama, which is 40 minutes outside of Birmingham. And yes, and if you have any questions, you can go to it's McGowan Farms LLC at gmail.com. And then on Instagram, we're McGowan Farms LLC there as well. And then we can go through the process of the mail order. We've got digital flyers that we can send out that kind of has a breakdown of what all is offered, the process, the how long it takes, your turnaround time, all of that is there. And kind of the next step that we're looking at is right now we're in the process of working on expansion. We're looking and actually working right now actively at expanding into some new pasture area because in the next 5 to 10 years, we'd like to be able to locally provide beef to our local schools, to the local grocery stores that are privately owned, and then a few other things because we do have several locally owned restaurants that have some of the world's best chefs in them. I'm thankful that they moved here. Pell City has Logan Martin Lake, and Logan Martin Lake attracts a lot of people. So it's starting to attract a little bit different criteria of people and people from other walks of life that are kind of wanting something different to eat. So we're hoping to in the next 5 years or so to be to where you can go into these local restaurants and nothing on the scale of I don't I don't want my stuff sold in New York and California and all that. If it gets sold there, it's great. But quality assurance is probably my biggest concern. So that is why right now we're focusing on making sure that we can touch everywhere that our beef goes. And then just in the same as with the tree service, that's why I still like to be very hands on job sites. Not because my guys need me, because they don't. They typically tell me get out the way, go somewhere and go do some cow stuff. But the quality is the biggest thing. So that is our goals for the next 5 to 10 years, just to get to where we can consistently provide that product on a little bit larger scale and then begin to reach back and offer some classes to younger African American men that are like me or any young man, but definitely black and brown young men who are 17 years old, 16 years old. They don't have a farm at their house, they don't have a tractor at their house, but they want one day. And mama tells them it's crazy. And they want to see it, they want to learn it, they want to touch
Yeah.
it. I want to be able to say, hey, come here once a month or whatnot. We're going to have these classes. You can learn this process of how I did it, And like I said, and on the business aspect, even people that are coming out of college, I've got a gentleman right now, he's about to graduate with his bachelor's, and me and him have talked a lot about how does he financially get himself in position to purchase 20 acres. Once he gets to 20 acres, what's his next step then? And how does he get himself to where one day he can put an animal out there and say, hey, this is mine. This is what I'll pass down to my son. Because land is the one thing they don't make any more of. And I think that's one of the big
So
reasons
right.
I put so much energy into the farm. It's not so much anything tied to dollar amounts. It's more the fact that this is an asset that if I can build on it, it's an asset that just keeps appreciating. And if it can be passed down, then it's just one more tool that my son has that I know that he can't find anywhere else. Or if he finds it somewhere else, it may be at a astronomical rate that I
Right, exactly.
hopefully he doesn't have to battle. So yeah, so the young couples out there, young men and women, regardless of age, this is possible. You don't have to go and just sign giant loans. There's ways to do it. Some are harder than others. And you may have to do like me and learn how to cut a tree and run a piece of equipment once you get your land.
Right.
But in the end, it all pays off, and it's super rewarding. I will say that.
Right.
It's not a fast return on investment. I'm always very transparent with new people about it.
Mhm.
Farming is a slow return on investment, but the Sunday mornings sitting on my porch drinking coffee, looking at the pasture and my pond and cattle, and that right there, that's my paycheck every week. I'm okay with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
And how old is your son?
he is 4 years old.
And he is very active on the farm. I mean the posts that you have made of him, he's very like he knows what's going on. He knows how to operate certain things, and to watch him run on land. We don't get to see kids do that too much today. We don't get to see them just run freely and not worry about where they are. And so there was one post in particular that kind of warmed my heart in that way,
Mhm.
just to see how freely he just had access to all this land.
Mhm.
And there's an energy that I'm sure that that will carry him, that will carry with him into adulthood.
That was one of the other bigger reasons for wanting the farm and wanting to go that direction as well. Is like I said, he's 4 years old and already can operate an excavator and a bobcat and a tractor, and he can look out there and tell me when something doesn't look right with an animal, or hey
Right,
dad, you forgot to plug the fence up. Hey dad, you forgot to do this, you forgot to do that. And
right.
what it's doing is he's working and he doesn't even realize that he's working, he's enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I hope that one day, he'll remember some of this blue collar ethics that he's getting and can add that to whatever educational route he decides to go. Because, like I always tell other young men, you want the ability to, whether you want to go work in a factory or whether you want to go and be a doctor, but you want the ability to give yourself options. It's
Yeah.
okay to be a blue collar guy. I love being it, but I
Mhm.
also like the ability to say, you know what, I want to be the office blue collar guy for a few days. Or, hey, you know what? I do want to go and get in the dirt and be that blue collar guy for a few days.
Mhm.
But you got to put the building blocks there first to get it there. So,
Right.
but yeah, that's the number one reason I love farming is the kids and just their access to safe freedom is what I call it. Just being able to be out here and be free.
The only thing that we didn't talk about in terms of having an impact on your business are these tariffs. And is that part of the strategy for you to really grow locally, so that you're not worried about, who could be rejecting your product because of, because of high prices or because of these tariffs?
So tariffs doesn't affect me on the sales revenue end as far as being able to to move my product or sell my product, but where tariffs definitely affects not just myself, but it does affect my customer is things that go into making our cows safe and making them grow as far as fencing materials that are coming from other countries and the tractors that we use. I own John Deere equipment. Well, John Deere is one of the biggest ones right now that's in the middle of the whole tariff ordeal, and they're pushing back the hardest out of all of the tractor manufacturers. Well, if that John Deere repair and parts just continues to inflate, at some point that goes into my overall cost to profit margin. And then at some point, my $5.50 piece of beef has to be $5.75. It has made me search and look a little harder for products before I just click and buy them. Things I need, to make the place move around here. So I'd say it is affecting me on a cost end 100%. And of course, diesel fuel. Diesel fuel is what runs most of this large equipment and stuff. And when it goes up, that's actually affected probably the tree business more than it has the cattle business right now. Um, and a lot of the parts for the tree business, not to get separate from the cattle, but a lot of the parts for the tree business to keep it running every day do come from overseas, several of them. So whereas there's items, my guys used to tell me on Monday, hey, Byron, we need this list of items, and I can have them here by Wednesday or Thursday. Well, now we're looking at 3, 4, 5 week turnaround, which does create some issues at times. So yeah, the tariffs are very real. They are being felt firsthand. We've kind of held off on a couple of the expansion points we had going. We were getting ready to purchase another farm truck for hauling and moving stuff around, and we decided to hold off because of what the tariffs are directly doing to truck sales and truck prices and things of that nature. So, yeah, it's definitely being felt in our home. Thankfully, right now, it's at a spot where we can absorb a lot of it. We're not having to pass it on to the customer right now. But I don't know what the future holds. Some of my neighbors are not as blessed as we are in that aspect. A lot of them heavily rely on some of the goods from other countries more. A lot of them rely on a lot of fertilizer and things of that nature. And it's made it to where they've had to downsize. A couple of guys I know around here have 100% gotten out of the business, and it's been in their family for 75 years. Yeah, so it's definitely real.
Well, I greatly appreciate the time that you spent today and all of the insight and the stories that you shared. Definitely want to stay in touch. Would love to have you back as you are expanding and growing your business. And please just let folks know where they can reach you again so that we can support you, whether it's through mail order or driving down to your farm, and experiencing this concierge service that you offer.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, on Instagram, it's McGowan Farms LLC. And then if you want to reach us directly, you can go and it's McGowan Farms LLC at gmail.com. And then if you are in the Southeast, if you're in Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, and have any sort of hazardous tree removals or need tree assessments, you can go to eastonhaulingandtree.com. And on that website, it has a complete list of all of our services, service areas, and direct contact numbers for myself and for the office.
Thank you so much, Byron.
Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening. We'll be back again next week with another great guest. Take care.
The Business First podcast is hosted and produced by Sonia Alleyne. Executive producer Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcast. On social media on IG at business_first_podcast. Follow the Mean Old Line Media Podcast Network on IG at Mean Old Line Media. Get the Mean Old Line Media app in the App Store or Google Play. The Business First Podcast is a Mean Old Line Media production.